line. I need to get a better material for me. I think it's
Okay.
minutes too.
Okay, so we'll call the meeting back to order, and we're on to our 9:30 appointment, which is never late. But that's not surprising. Nancy Green, come on up.
Got me here?
Yep. Sort of tied together to Green.
Nancy, you're a little low.
I know I am. I'm gonna move over here.
Chair.
There you go.
Not tall enough for that chair. Good morning, Warden Weber, council, staff, and community members. As mentioned, I'm Nancy Green and a member of the Social Housing Action Coalition. I'm pleased to be joining you this morning. Briefly, I am here to share information about the importance of non-market housing options for our communities, current housing realities, opportunities for action, and to bring forward some considerations to you at council. So SHAC, as we are known, is an active coalition which has been working since 2012 to build awareness and facilitate action on the need for improved access to healthy, safe, and affordable housing options for all in Lunenburg and Queens counties. We believe that housing is a human right. It is enshrined in Canadian law through the National Housing Strategy. We can all appreciate the importance of having a healthy, safe, and affordable and stable place to call home. It impacts our health and well-being, our communities, and economy. We all have a responsibility to ensure that everyone in our community has access to healthy, safe, and affordable housing options that reflect the changing of housing needs throughout life. Why do non-market housing options matter? Let's have a quick look at what we know about housing in the municipality. The ability of a household to live in a community is not solely related to housing options available. There are a number of community dynamics at play, some of which are noted on this slide. The current housing situation is reflective of the dynamics between housing, population, and economic realities. For additional context, I've included on the right-hand side of the slide some new data regarding poverty in Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia currently has the highest rate of poverty and highest rate of food insecurity among the provinces in Canada. The child poverty rate in Lunenburg County has increased by nearly 10% since 2020. Certainly, the growing need in our communities is contributing to the current housing situation, or is impacted by. You will notice at the bottom that among low-income families in Nova Scotia, nearly 70% are spending more than 30% of their income on their shelter-related costs, and nearly 40% are spending 50% or more. This is the housing spectrum, which shows the range of housing options required for the health and sustainability of communities and reflects the changing needs of households. Those within the yellow box note where non-market housing options exist. Currently, there are very few non-market housing options in the municipality. There are 25 public housing units for seniors within the municipality, which are owned and operated by the Nova Scotia Public Housing Agency. Dr. Catherine Livington-Reid from Cape Breton University recently shared that 89% of rental housing stock in Nova Scotia is privately owned and operated. There has traditionally been little investment in and intentional focus on the development and support of non-market housing options in Nova Scotia. Instead, we have looked to the housing market to meet needs. However, it is unable to meet the needs of everyone. Clearly, the market is controlling the vast majority of rental housing, and other than the current rent cap in place on occupied units, there is little regulation to protect the affordability of housing. Even the affordability standards set by CMHC are based on average market rents. The market determines affordability rather than affordability being reflective of what households are actually able to afford. Supporting the development of non-market housing options is an opportunity for investment in the community and can help ensure affordability of housing. Affordable housing is housing that is affordable, and that depends on a number of factors, including household income, size, needs, etc. We encourage council and staff to consider your local context to determine what affordability looks like here. This information on this slide is intended to provide some perspective to affordability in the municipality. Spending more than 30% of household income on shelter costs, which includes your rent, mortgage, utilities, insurance, and other costs, is an indicator of financial strain for a household and is a marker of affordability for a community. The first numbers on the slide, the first kind of graph, shows what a household would need to be earning to afford average shelter costs in the municipality. And these are coming from the census. So for tenants, average shelter costs are $848. For homeowners, $817. And this is from the 2021 census data, so it's a little bit old. And we know that a lot has changed in the community since. To the right side of the slide, we see that a single minimum wage earner household who works 40 hours per week could afford shelter costs that do not exceed $730 a month. All shelter costs, not just rent. Finally, on the bottom portion of the slide is shown affordable shelter costs for various households, which earn a median income in the municipality. And you can see that even households with a median income may be struggling with affordability. The Nova Scotia Housing Need Report for the municipality provides further evidence that homeownership and rental housing is unaffordable for many households in the community. There has been a lack of ongoing qualitative and quantitative data collection about the housing needs in our region, which has resulted in the invisibilization or misunderstanding of the extent of the need for housing for all in our communities. The Nova Scotia Housing Needs Report has brought to light some of the issues our communities are facing. And I've pulled some data from the report that you're probably quite familiar with, or may not be, but it's there for your consideration. A resident survey reported in the needs report shows us that housing options are limited. Affordability and availability of housing is a concern for many, and the rising cost of living is having an impact. We also know that housing insecurity and homelessness exist based on the work of the South Shore Open Doors Association. They have completed 18 intakes from individuals who call this municipality home. We've also heard about the use of fixed-term leases and seasonal evictions, which are contributing to housing insecurity locally. Finally, a lack of access to public housing, coupled with long wait lists, indicates that our current non-market housing options are insufficient for the need. We believe the growth of non-market housing options is necessary to address these issues. There is an opportunity for the municipality to intentionally support the development of non-market housing options, to ensure affordable, accessible, and suitable housing options for those whose needs are not able to be met by market housing. I do want to take a few moments just to acknowledge the forward momentum and the good work that is happening here in the District of Chester. You are taking steps to identify and prioritize actions related to addressing housing need. You have offered support to the project for non-market housing in New Ross. You identified a number of initiatives through the Housing Accelerator Fund application, which I understand you've received funding for. Congratulations. And you've also undertaken a review of your short-term rentals. So thank you for that work.
Thank you.
We ask you, though, to consider how are you... Some other things. You're on the right track. Keep going. How are you going to prioritize and support non-market housing development? What actions can the municipality take to address the needs of all residents? And so we offer up a few opportunities. Implement your Housing Accelerator Fund identified initiatives. I know you receive funding. If you need support, or if there's some way that the Housing Coalition can support you in that, please reach out. We encourage you to look beyond the numbers, to understand the experience of housing need. Engage and bring attention to the voices that are not being heard, and I heard some of that this morning. We'd encourage you to receive the South Shore Open Doors Association's monthly data reports at council meetings. It's a good way to be aware of what is happening in the community around housing need. I encourage you to use available information to make evidence-informed decisions. We've never had more information about housing need in our communities. Learn about best practices, explore tools available to address housing needs and pressures. There's many options to explore, including landlord registries, tourism taxes, vacancy taxes, all of which could be used to fund housing efforts. Support community capacity for the development of non-market housing options. Learn about what other communities are doing. Advocate for changes to enable or support non-market housing development. Partner and engage the community to explore opportunities. And learn more about non-market housing types, such as housing trusts and co-ops. Maybe connect or become a member of the Nova Scotia Nonprofit Housing Association and continue to be engaged with our coalition. You have the power to have an impact and leave a legacy. The decisions you make today will have impacts in the future. It is your decision to make with the best interests of your community in mind. We ask you to consider the evidence, the experiences, the needs, and your opportunities and options. Your community is counting on you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Some of these issues,
Absolutely.
and I think we all recognize that there is a problem, and it's just the role that we play, and what's the most effective way for us to engage and help to solve the problem without getting directly involved in building housing.
Of course. Yeah, and building housing isn't a role that we would expect the municipality to take on, but how can you support those groups or bring together individuals in the community that may be in a position or have a desire to do that, and how can you enable that housing, prioritize the development of non-market housing?
Put the infrastructure in place for them, provide property that we own already.
Exactly, all those things. Yes, exactly, like the New Ross project and the support you've provided there.
Just do it in more places more often.
Yeah, we're at a point where market housing has become quite expensive. It's in high demand, there's growing demand, and that means that a lot of people are going to be left out. And so that's where non-market housing can really have an impact by providing community-owned and operated housing that tends to have a focus on ensuring affordability and accessibility for all members of the community. And we don't have a big history of providing non-market housing options, so
No, it's not been an issue.
help grow that.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
I think one of the problems with our current model right now is that the housing business is one that municipalities, I guess except for big urban centers like HRM, really haven't been in. And the province has vacated that space. And instead of actually building housing, as they once did many years ago, instead they're providing big grants to not-for-profits to try to build housing. And many of those not-for-profits, for example, have no actual experience in what it takes to build housing and operate it. So that model, I think actually, I think you mentioned it, I think that it's going to fail. And I've observed it failing. So the Social Open Doors Association actually had a plan to build large multi-unit project in Bridgewater, and they failed, even despite having millions of dollars in grants, because they just couldn't make the business case work because they don't know how to build housing. Frankly, that's, I'm really boiling down the story, but in a nutshell. And I think that many not-for-profits are going to suffer the same fate. It's not I would argue that it's not a developer isn't enriching themselves because of high rents now. The average cost per unit is in the $400,000 range. So it costs so much to build each unit out based on the labor and materials costs that it demands these. I would think that a better model, if we were advocating as a municipality or as a Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities or as groups like your own, that we should be advocating instead for direct subsidies to those who need so that people who need housing can live alongside others that are in market housing, and they get a stipend or whatever so that they can live there. And it's probably a better mix for the community, where their neighbors are just ordinary folks and everybody's all together, and rather than putting all the impoverished people in one building. And I don't actually like that model very much. So if the province wants to do anything, I believe instead of giving not-for-profits millions of dollars and having projects continually running against roadblocks, it would actually be better to give money to those that actually need the housing, and then they could just enjoy regular, normal market housing like everyone else that needs housing. That's my commentary, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's quite okay, and you're not making invalid points either. Like, those are all considerations. It's a very complex landscape around housing right now. We recognize that building costs a lot. We know that developers and landlords aren't necessarily making huge amounts of money in the provision of housing. We recognize that community housing or non-market housing options may not work in all communities and for everyone. I see the province investing in the development of non-housing through the establishment of the Non-Market Housing Association for Nova Scotia. I think that there needs to be some work done to build the capacity of those non-market providers, those groups in the community, to help them learn about operating and managing building housing. It's a very complex process. There's complex needs that may come by providing housing for folks who perhaps have require supports or may need supports. So I think we need to have a number of options available. Certainly we do have a rent supplement program within Nova Scotia, which has had varying degrees of success for both tenants and landlords. Part of that is kind of a designated rent supplement program where a landlord enters into an agreement with the province to provide subsidized units or to take on individuals who may qualify for a subsidized unit. And I do believe that there's also rent subsidies attached to individuals where they get an additional funding from the province, I think, or through the Canada Nova Scotia Housing Benefit to help supplement, what the difference between what they could afford and what the rent is in the community. And I think we need options all along, a number of options to help address the situation in the community. I do think that non-market housing groups that are being relied upon to provide public housing or community-based housing in Nova Scotia currently need support. They need adequate funding and resources to make those projects viable. I don't see them providing large-scale housing in our communities. But I do see them playing an important role in providing supportive housing options where services and community supports are wrapped around them. But yeah, I don't think that there's any clear, straight, simple answer. I think that there's a lot of considerations to be made around the whole issue of how do we ensure that everyone in our community has a healthy and safe and affordable place to call home. And this is one of those options that has worked in other jurisdictions. To some extent, maybe not in a grand scale, but I don't know that, so I shouldn't say that. But I do believe we need to have options along the continuum of the housing spectrum to ensure that everybody's needs are being met.
Tina?
Thank you. I think I'll start with Councillor Bino's comments as a member of a board that's working as a non-profit organization, hoping for millions of dollars. We are preparing a business case now. It's tough. It's tough. We're getting closer every day. What's that even mean, right? But we are. And so I want to thank certainly the support of SHAC and Councillor Azov, who sits on SHAC, representing this municipality, and always brings back committee reports. And he and I will often have conversations outside, just again, high level, just conversations around all entire spectrum of housing stock and so on, and just what the project in New Ross, which is part of this municipality, part of one of the projects of the municipality, is hoping to achieve and still continuing to work towards. So hopefully for that. So I want to be able to thank you, as I think I told you when I saw you in New Ross, I don't even know when, a couple months ago now. I know that I extended the invitation to my fellow councillors and staff, and Tara was there at the public meeting that we had in New Ross to update the community. So I get to thank Tara as well, maybe now today too. So Tara, and so you, Tara, and you, Nancy, were both there, so thank you for that. It meant a lot to me, it meant a lot to others, actually, when we were talking and debriefing afterwards, because you certainly are carrying the hat and looking through the lens, as you always have with social housing, so thank you for that. The municipality has certainly been supportive with the amount of monies that they granted the group, if you will, and we're still working through that agreement, because there is an agreement in place, official agreement around timelines and units that are required to be affordable based on, I'm not sure what that formula is. I have to look at that document if it's our own affordable rate or if we're basing it federally or provincially. I don't know really wearing the municipal hat now, not the New Ross hat. So that was nice, that $100,000. But I know I've sat here at this table for 11 years now, and we do have a tremendous amount of monies in our community fund that's coming through the wind revenue source, if you will, and we have granted quite a number of $100,000 grants throughout the municipality. So, you know, that's part of the equation there, part of the list of where the municipality has supported many projects to the tune of that amount and maybe even, and actually more. In addition to the money, I know that it's very much appreciated that staff are hands-on and providing support as much as they can, especially with this recent release of the Nova Scotia Housing Strategy. I've had discussions certainly as well, and so have the consultant and other members of our board with staff, Public Works, I'm talking now, Public Works, as well. I've had conversations with the warden around what might be next, and it kind of flows a little tiny bit directly back with the Housing Accelerator Fund in terms of what you just referenced 5 minutes ago, and that is infrastructure in place to help such projects, if it makes sense. So we are having conversations around where this project is being proposed to be constructed, or will be constructed, and the whole water, sewer, and we're working through that ourselves as a group. But you know, again, it's important. So it's all on the horizon. It's all in the discussion. So thank you for everything that you've done. And actually, David Murdoch is here as a volunteer citizen rep to Shag, and I'm happy for that as well, because David is a resident of our municipality, so that's nice. That's wonderful. A question for you. And we've been grappling with this for just actually quite recently, and you referenced it around the 30% of, you know, monthly income and all that.
Yeah.
What is the figure or the amount that federally, CMHC, and maybe provincially, housing would be using right now for affordable rent? CMHC is 80% of market rate.
Yes.
Okay, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
Provincially, where are we with what the province may or may not be using for an affordable monthly rate?
The province uses household income limits to determine affordability for different household sizes in terms of their subsidy programs. And for, you know, they've recently announced, I shouldn't say recently, in the last year, they've put more money, $40,000, into a program to support the development of accessory dwelling units to support increasing housing density and opportunities. However, that needs to be affordable housing, and they do use, to my understanding, is the household income limits, which sets, you know, you can find them online. I know that we had somebody join us from the Nova Scotia Public Housing Agency recently at a SHAC meeting, and she shared those rates, so I'd be happy to share that with you.
About that. Thank you very much.
Sometimes from a landlord's perspective, if you're looking at trying to create an affordable option, when, like the province, it sounds good, like, of course, you want to tie rental income to the income of the tenant, but it becomes quite invasive when you have to approach your tenant and find out what their income is. It's very difficult, and pretty degrading actually for everybody involved.
Yeah.
It's, I dislike those policies for that reason. So I don't know what the answer is. I've been involved in a few projects now, including some of my own, where we've attempted to look at creating the affordable housing part of this and look at what programs were available, but it was impossible to do. It was impossible to build it and actually not lose money.
Yeah, and that's the situation we're in. So be a voice for your community around the needs of those who maybe need access to affordable housing. Support work that's happening or advocacy that you can do to encourage the province to review those programs and policies they have. Even with the rent supplement program, they've clawed back. I shouldn't say they've clawed back. They've reduced the availability of the subsidy. It used to be that if you were spending 30% or more of your income, you could apply for a rent subsidy. It's now increased to 50%. So that means fewer people are able to access that. That happened, I want to say in the spring of 2022 or 2023. I don't know, time's a flat circle. Yeah, so there are things, there are opportunities to advocate for supporting those in our communities who need affordable housing options. SHAC does believe that non-market housing options are part of that solution, not necessarily the solution. They are part of that solution because the market hasn't been able to necessarily meet the needs of everyone in the community, nor should they be expected to. Some people have complex needs and require supports. Also, the thing about non-market housing is that it can be remain affordable for a longer period. It may remain affordable for a longer period of time rather than subsidizing affordable housing units where a developer or a landlord may enter into a contract to provide affordable units for a period of time. A non-market, if they are successful, when they are successful, are able to continue to provide those affordable units in the community for as long as they exist.
Thanks, Nancy, and I've been on SHAC for a while, and we've always talked about this housing, and we know the provincial government has dropped the ball, as they did with the Coastal Protection Act. But I was going to ask Andre, and actually he sort of answered it, but as a developer, so when you, I think Bob Uden had built some units and has some of those things. So the requirement, is it the requirement of the developer to find the income level, or is that through a government agency, or is it too cumbersome to do that? I guess what I'm asking is if you build 8 units and you want to make 4 of them affordable, or what we class as affordable, the process for the developer, you're going to build every unit to the same standard, obviously, and then you approach the government before you start to build and say, I'm going to do this program. I guess, is it too cumbersome to do that for a developer?
Well, in development, before you build or make plans or anything, you have to run its own business case.
Yeah.
So you have to finance these projects.
Yeah.
So you're trying to establish what your revenue is and your expenses. And, fortunately, like the federal, like CMHC, it's more tied to market rates. Of course, their data lags behind. So like we went through COVID times and there was a sudden increase in costs. So the costs are real time, but the revenue that they're expecting is based on incomes and all that stuff that were like 3 or 4 years old. So from a development standpoint, your costs are in your project when you're doing your estimates are, say, whatever today's rates. And again, like you're looking at rental that they say this is the affordable. If you want to meet the criteria for affordability, then it has to be this rent. But that's based on income from 4 years ago, which it doesn't match the cost. So you're already at a disadvantage there. And the provincial ones they're more tied to income of the tenant. And those are uglier ones that then you sort of have to. It's hard to plan units in advance because you don't know who you're going to rent to necessarily, and then you're in there in people's business, and it's just gruesome. So most if you're looking at it, most of the people are looking at like a CMHC style model but the numbers can't work. It's impossible. It's impossible to build that without getting a grant. And of course, there's no appetite to give private sector developers grants. So then you have to create a not-for-profit, but by their very nature, most not-for-profits don't have experience building housing.
They don't.
So then their costs escalate because they usually don't know really 100% what they're doing, and they have to hire consultants to help them do it all.
Yeah.
So, which costs a whole lot of money, and then, so the whole thing just continues to collapse on itself. It's just a terrible, terrible program.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you actually survey probably all of Atlantic Canada, like how many successful, like, not-for-profit or affordable housing projects have actually been built. Very few, I would argue. You know, so, and we have like I want to just, as you mentioned, thank you, market housing as part of the solution, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe I just dropped that. But I mean, historically, in our communities, it's the older stock housing that was the more affordable housing.
Yeah.
And maybe not, you know, maybe dated or whatever, but it's okay. And, you know, so market housing actually plays a big role, I feel, in the provision of affordable housing, because the more market housing we bring online, those people that can afford it generally will migrate towards that, and then that leaves more vacancy and lower cost units.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we need all types of housing, and the market obviously does currently occupy a big space in that and has a big role to play in housing in our communities. I think I recently heard about a report, a study that was done in Saskatchewan somewhere. I'll try to find it. Where they reviewed this notion that by increasing housing stock in the community, that rents would be maybe reduced or more affordable would become available. And what they found was that in some cases, many cases, vacant units are being used to support equity. Landlords aren't necessarily choosing to fill them. Because the property may be more valuable to them in terms of what it provides in equity for, I don't know, however you use that. I'm not a financial person, I don't know. Than it is to fill them with the costs associated with being a landlord. So I think that there's some view that needs to be taken to house the financialization of housing and the investment tool that it is becoming. To ensure that housing is actually providing housing for people. Housing in our communities is being used to house people, rather than it being left vacant for other reasons. And where that's possible, I don't know how much control there would be in terms of the market housing, but non-market housing options are intended to be providing housing for people. That's usually their mandate. People in the community care about their community, they want to do something, and so they decide to become non-market housing providers, which is not uncomplicated. It is, there's a steep learning curve, I think, for our communities around housing, but we do need those options all along the continuum. No one thing is going to be the solution. We need everything moving forward.
But I think the biggest solution to me, again, the provincial government built all kinds of public housing in the 70s. Figured the private sector would continue, but the private sector didn't because they're not into not-for-profit. So unless the province steps up and starts to do public housing, we're going to be sitting here, I won't be, but in 20 years, and it'll be the same thing. If you don't, and they say, well, we can't do it, it takes too long. Well, it'll take too long if you wait and wait and wait. You just have to say, and the government doesn't have the backbone to do that. They know that the only way to create housing is for them to do it, for the actual government to do it, for affordable housing. Developers aren't going to do it. Doesn't make a business case for it. And there's not that many developers that are just out of the goodness of their heart. That's just not the way business works. It's just not.
Their responsibility.
And God bless the nonprofits. But, I mean, that to me is a small section, a very small part. The biggest part is the government. And as municipalities, you know, they're stepping away from all the responsibilities. They're just trying to download. And then, you know, we get public that says, well, why aren't you building? I get it all the time, why aren't you building housing? And then they say, well, you're just passing the buck. Well, we are passing the buck because we don't have the finance to do the problem stuff. And that's their job. It's like healthcare and like education. And, you know, I get frustrated. We just rehash the same things and you know, the government is responsible for that. And they should start to build public housing because they have the means. And I know you could say the government screws everything up when they build something. But with housing, I'm willing to trade off the screw ups to have housing. That's my feeling.
Thank you very much, Nancy, for
Thanks,
coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy.
We just try to keep working together.
Sorry for
No
the
problem.
I'd just like to say, like, I really appreciate your thoughtful discussion and questions in the conversation. And as a resident of the District of Chester, thank you for your deliberation and continued support and acknowledgement of the needs around housing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, Floyd has to leave. He has a 11 o'clock thing that he's already missed.
See you, buddy.
7.2, infrastructure operations, Walker Park.
Morning, Council.
Morning.
So as the information report that you received in your package states, we are in the middle of a multi-phased upgrade to the Wild Rose Park. First phase was the accessible washrooms, which we opened up for Canada Day. And in that process, phase 2 was already planned, but in that process, it was clearly shown we had a wheelchair rider come out and look at the washrooms before we opened them. And it was very, very hard for him to navigate through the park. And when I've been out there, I've seen residents actually go down the road rather than through the park because of the pathways. So back in October, you kindly gave us $300,000 to do phase 2. We've modified a little bit due to the discussions this morning and the cross culverts that are going through the park. The first part by Island View, we're not going to do right away until they fix those culverts that they've impacted. The other 6 culverts, we've been in discussions with the area manager. We're just going to pave where those culverts go, and when they come back to do the culverts, they're going to reinstate with concrete for us so that we can use this money now. It has a end date of March 31st. It has to be spent by that. We only have this construction season to use that money.
Yeah.
I like that.
So that gets us going, and they're gonna help us out in the end so that because they're probably not gonna get to those culverts until the fall from what they told us on Monday, so otherwise I'd be coming back next year for capital money.
So what, Tammy, did he discuss the culverts have anything to do with the paving project? Was that tied into anything?
Yes, they didn't go forward with any of the other culverts after they impacted that fiber, so there's 8 actual culverts going through that park. So the first 2 have heavily impacted.
What I'd like to do with that fiber.
Yeah. So in the report, it shows that we are concreting the pathways and we are paving the 4 parking areas. And this will give a great increase to the accessibility for any wheelchair riders, wheeled mobility devices of any sort through the park, and we're hoping to make it a lot more active for the community. There's 2 old boat launches that are in the park that maybe they'll use it more for SUP and everything if they have better access to get to them through the park. So in there, the stairs are unsafe right now. They've sunk, they're not the proper step height. We are gonna remove them. I've had some community members come to me after we did this plan that they kind of like the stairs on one side and then they kind of want to walk up the other side of the beach. So with the removal of the first part of the park, there will be a phase 3 to finish all of our improvements, and we'll look at replacing the stairs at that point. And the
ramp that we're looking to install will be fully accessible. It'll be wide enough for 2 chairs to pass, and we'll have Moby mats go down to the water so people can actually use the water. There's really no point in putting a ramp without the Moby mats because they just stop.
I mean, yeah, they can't get across the sand, right?
Yes.
Adele, do you want to mention this letter that you're on?
I do,
Because it's all
it's
part
part of it. I received this letter from Nicholas Buckle, who lives in the area in Ashley. And they just moved here, built a house here a couple of years ago. And it says, Councilor Asaph and Committee of the Whole. We were reviewing the agenda for the Committee of the Whole meeting, and we're excited to learn more details on the proposed plan to make improvements to Wildrose Park. Since moving here in the summer of '22, our family has been frequent visitors to the park and experienced firsthand the difficulty of using strollers on the gravel path. Now, I think he's looking at the lens of not accessibility, but just
Any
so,
device.
just keep that in mind, yeah. A paved walk path through the park is a welcome improvement, which will enhance the enjoyment of this park for many of us living in the community. And will make it more accessible to not only strollers, but people with mobility issues. We have some concerns about the 39 paved parking spots in the proposed plan. While we fully support paved parking areas at the northern and southern ends of the park, we are not convinced of the value of paving additional parking within the park. Even as gravel, the inner parking areas break up the experience of walking through the park and take away from the natural beauty. Paving these inner parking areas would make the park look and feel more like a nice parking lot than a park. As frequent users, we have never seen any of the parking areas in full use, not even in the summer, so we question if we're getting good value for their dollar by paving the 2 inner areas. Would you consider paving the areas at the north and south end of the park and returning the inner areas to green space? I think this is an option. We could look better and save money over time, less maintenance. Thank you very much for moving this plan forward. We hope we were able to provide some valuable feedback on how to make this little gem that much better. Please don't make it look like a parking lot instead of a park. And it's from Nicholas and Ashley.
Where are you on that issue?
Well, I can't visualize, I can visualize what it means. I think it means there are small parking lots by the washroom.
Generator, on either side of the washroom in the generator building, there's 2 parking lots.
There's 2 parking lots there.
If he means those 2, those are the ones that are gonna have primarily the accessible parking spots, because they're the closest to the washroom.
Yes,
So for accessibility wise, I still need to hard surface those
Yeah.
2.
okay. And like you say, the either end, I think it's a great idea. Maybe what we could do is, if that's possible, we can respond to Nick's, just what you said, what the rationale is for that. Because and I wrote him an email to that effect,
Yeah.
but I didn't have the details of why we were doing it.
Yeah.
I knew it was for accessibility reasons, but the explanation would be fine. Thank you.
That's no problem, you forward that to me and I can respond back. It's like, we couldn't get any parker closer to
Yeah.
the washroom.
Yeah.
So those are the 2 closest spots, so.
Yeah.
Tina?
Thank you. Was excited to receive the report today, and Wildrose Park is not just used by, and how we are going to define the community, so I didn't want to really jump on it and say, because maybe everyone here is defining the community as the greater, large, humongous region, because they are the community for such a large geographic area, uses this park, uses this area, loves it, embraces it from day one. So I think all of that's laid out in front of us in terms of suggestions and improvements and where we're going with phase 2 and phase 3. I think yay, yay.
Because it's, sorry, Andre, you go ahead, buddy.
Thanks, Evan.
You're welcome, sir.
How many stalls are we putting alongside the washrooms?
Alongside the building itself?
The
No.
ones in question.
The ones in question?
Yeah.
I think it was 46 total, 34 standard and 5 accessible.
Do you know how many? Oh, it's 5 alongside that?
Yeah.
Is that a designated requirement to have so many per? Or?
In building codes, there usually is, but since we're trying to make this comply with all our new accessibility standards, we're making sure that there is at least 1 to 2 in each one.
I was just wondering if there's a way to minimize the parking lot alongside the washroom area, if the concern raised was that there's too much parking lot in the middle of the park, that if we could just shrink that down to, like, instead of 5 stalls, to put it as 3 or whatever, because it would be mostly the washroom users that would need it. The other ones could park on either end, no problem.
It would, but we still need to connect the concrete walkways through, so there still needs to be a hard surface
Yeah, well,
through
they
it.
could make a little walkway too, a smaller parking lot, that's all I'm saying. I know you already have a design probably and all that, but
Yeah,
do a small revision.
But that, yeah, that would make, like, so if you park, and you're in it, and you need accessibility, instead of a whole wide parking lot you're talking, in those
Well,
areas.
they have 5 stalls, so
Yeah.
if you had, say,
there's
2
5 stalls through the park.
That's true.
Yeah, okay. How many stalls?
Accessible
You're adding
stalls.
34 stalls.
Cool, so
Standard
so how many stalls are along the drive, like, they're concerned about the ones around the washroom? How many are there?
I think there's around 20 in total.
That's a lot.
Including 3 accessibility bays.
Yeah, I guess I was wondering, if you shrunk that down to being something like 5 in the middle, and then you, because they're saying they never see it full, I don't know what Abdella's experience is.
No, those ones in where he's talking about are very rarely used. Especially the one by the, it's really not parking, but people do haul in there where the washroom is. They shouldn't haul in there, but there's room enough to haul the car in. But it's dangerous to try to back it, the sight lines. So it would make sense that where the parking area is for handicapped accessible, that they have, and I'm not saying a whole paved area there, but I guess just a paved area for them to access the washroom from their car. So are you talking a pathway there? I guess I'm not understanding.
See, do you see the
black- the black
the one in the
spots on
middle is I guess, there's a washroom there.
So the washroom is up by the arc, the arm you can see. Those 2 arms come in, that's the beach area.
All right.
Yeah, and the washroom's next to that.
And the 2 parking spaces on either side
All
are
right,
the
so where's
closest.
the one in question by the resident?
Both of those that are showing on the screen now,
In black.
in black.
If you zoom out, there's actually 4 of those.
There's 4 spots, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I guess the question is, how big does that center one have to be? Or does it have to be, if you've got,
The
to get to the washroom from that one, do you just need a couple stalls there? And would that be adequate and still address the concern of the resident? Sorry, it's your area.
So you want us to shrink the parking area itself and make it more part of the park with the
I think
few
the
stalls?
bulk of the parking for the park that I see used are at both ends, the
Both ends.
north and south end.
Not so much.
Not so much in the intermediate parking. And now, if we can, I guess just put a pathway through those intermediate parking areas. I don't think there's a need to pave all of that. I mean, but again, I mean, if you're getting out of a car, you need some kind of a solid surface.
Yeah.
So,
Well, the question isn't whether it's gonna be, if they're gonna park there, you're gonna make it a parking, but how many stalls do you need in that, the second one to the bottom? I think
Do you
that's
want me
what-
to remove parking areas completely?
Do you want that gone, or do you want it as is, or do you want that to be just 2 or 3 stalls so that people can, if
I
they need to
think-
go to the washroom?
I think that the stalls that should be paved,
They're all gonna be paved.
Yeah.
All the stalls are gonna be paved. So the
Yeah.
question is, how many?
Yeah.
And how big?
And how big? I can't park, if I only pave part of those parking areas, they're just gonna get destroyed over time, the asphalt will start to get removed.
Okay.
So you really have to pave the whole section if you're gonna pave it.
But if each one of these is like 10 stalls,
Yeah.
do you need 10 each?
you know,
Manny, you,
All I was going to say, and maybe just to clarify for Abdella, really the areas committed to those 2 centre parking lots that we've got now, we can reduce those if as you just described from Mr. Buckle's letter, if it means that we say like all of the disabled, so the accessible parking bays will go in those 2 areas, and maybe just a couple of regular parking bays. And then that would free up a little bit of extra regular parking bays on the north and the south side. So we're still probably maintaining pretty much the same amount of parking, but reducing the 2 centre, or the two middle ones, to a more compact area
Yeah.
and to provide more green space.
Yes, that's what
So
I think-
that's easily done, that's not a
okay,
problem. But it all will be paid.
that makes sense, yeah.
Great, what decision do we have to make for today? Nothing.
It was informational.
Just information only, this is what we're
Got a
doing.
little
and-
more information, so.
Can I ask one question? Do we have in any of our long-term, medium-term plans, a plan to connect the end of the park, but on the north, like, I guess it's probably not north, it's probably west, east, to the Gather We Can Park with a sidewalk or something, like, because it seems like you can get all the way to here and then you have to like run the gauntlet to get the rest of the way. It seems like it'd be nice if it would actually connect it.
It
We
hasn't
don't
been
have it as
requested
planned
yet.
yet.
No, it hasn't been
Something we
requested.
should probably
Yeah.
talk about at some point.
Connected parks, those parks, it's unbelievable how much they're used. And I mean, Wild Rose was used tremendously until we blocked it off and it's looking like, I'm getting a lot of complaints of how it looks. I said, look, it's,
It'd be really nice if you could get on the sidewalk and go all the way through Water Rose and go all the way up to Together We Can.
yeah, that's,
That's
yeah,
part of the park future development.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Tina, you're on.
Thank you. Footsteps of Canadian Heroes. So it's a Nova Scotia ride to remember. There's an event that's happening in Chester Grant, Chester Basin next Wednesday, July 24th. The public is most certainly invited and encouraged to attend. And it's going on social media, it's certainly getting the coverage that it should now that the schedule's been firmed up from what I understand. Warden Weber will be there and provide remarks, just a couple of remarks, because it's not about us, if you will, at all. But the organizing group did want me to extend it to fellow councillors if they're able to be there. And it's a rolling barrage, motorbikes and trailers, honoring,
It's happening all across the country.
it's happening from coast to coast in different areas. It's next Wednesday, and they're estimating that they will be arriving at Forest Heights at about 10:35 a.m. And the remarks will proceed the remarks will take place at around 11. The official ceremony, very short, very formal, which will be headed up by our two area legions, Chester Basin and New Ross. So it will be an official Legion event as well. There will be a wreath laying ceremony to honor the sacrifice of Private Richard Green, where there is a stone there in recognition. They will be using the parking lot of Forest Heights, and that's already been arranged through the municipality. It's all coming together very well. They have a schedule that they will be leaving the Channel Lunenburg and coming through Highway 3, and they've estimated their time as any good event planners would. It's on the committee at all, don't get me wrong. And they will have an RCMP escort, which is nice as well, because we're all part of the same world and the same support. From Forest Heights, the event will move to Chester Basin Legion in the parking lot of the Legion itself. There will be refreshments and conversation, and also tours of the official tribute trailer. It will be open and available for people to poke their head in and have conversations, and that's where we will see photos of those that we have lost across the country, and tidbits of information and medals and so on. So they just reached out to me because there's an organizer from my community and they were looking to book Forest Heights, and also just letting council know in an official way. So again, they will be at Forest Heights at around 10:35
On Wednesday.
on Wednesday, and the ceremony around 11, won't be long. Then I'm moving down with the RCMP escort because again, it's the official barrage from coast to coast. So in that area.
I can say, I'm sorry, Alan, if I just could, before we adjourn, I forgot to mention it, that in Beach Hill today at the AFN, they're having it was on Facebook, but I just thought I mentioned it. It's called the Gold River Red Road Project. And what the project, it's a program that it's ran by community leaders of AFN to promote healthy choices and to combat drug and alcohol abuse in First Nation communities. Now, that event starts at 12, it's just like refreshments and things like that, and it's open to everyone, and I just thought I'd pass it. I didn't know if anybody else saw it on Facebook, I just thought I'd pass it along. Because I'm gonna actually probably drop in there on my way home.
Okay, motion to adjourn, people.
So moved.
Discussion, all those in favor, opposed, motion carried.